Hi everyone, welcome back to another SimplePlanes video, and in this video, I'll be showing you how to fly the SWL-10. So let's get started. So the SWL-10, even though I left off a few weeks ago not really being finished, is actually finished now. And this is the second time I'm trying to record this video. The first time I recorded it was a few days ago, but then I made a few key changes, and so I'm doing this video again. But now I'll cut to what I originally had to say about the progress updates. There have been a lot of progress updates, and I think this plane's actually finished. So when we enter the cockpit, the first noticeable things we have are the autopilot reset switches and the C door panel, which is actually, this means cargo door, and there are some controls on here. For the cargo door, there is in fact a switch which is hidden in the fuselage back here. By the way, I've made an interior here. There's not much of it because it's a cargo plane, but there's that, and there's a cockpit door, which I keep forgetting about, but it's there, and you can open it by clicking a switch or pulling a lever. Anyway, so because it was difficult to reach that switch in the cargo bay, this cargo door panel also doubles as some controls for the cargo door. More specifically, you can open and close it. And then there's some lights which indicate if it's open or closed. The default light is never really meant to be on, but I made it to turn on when the cargo door is either opening or closing, and the hydraulics are switched off. The heading panel on the autopilot, I found that it was pretty difficult to click a button 180 times to get the heading bug to turn around. So I've added a second row, which is like the gray to adjust, so you can adjust it by 5, and then the top one is by 1. The reset switches, I've taken the code style from the common nav panel reset ones, and then I also added a fuel gauge here. And you'll notice these valves are now put together. It's because I had to fit a fuselage grip in here. And with the new SimplePlanes VR update, I wanted this plane to be VR friendly, virtual reality. I decided that I'd just make all these 4 throttles move as one, even though they're controlled 4 engines. And then the engine match switches dictated which engines will be switched on at once. And in normal flight, this is all 4, so it doesn't really matter if all 4 are being controlled at once, because that's what was happening earlier anyway. And actually, there are a few more updates. There's nothing changing on the overhead panel. However, this checklist has had one small change. I've added a credit in the checklist description, built and coded by PlaneFlightX, that is my SimplePlanes username. And then I actually mirrored the checklist to the right side where the co-pilot is, or the first officer. And that was harder than it looks, because I mirrored it, everything was inverted, I had to redo the connections, and I actually had to recode it because I want the checklists to be able to be operated independently. One for the co-pilot and one for the captain. And yep, that is all the updates. So this inside I just did by painting everything grey, and then adding another set of fuselages that were slightly smaller, and then painting those grey too. And there were probably a few minor ones, but that's pretty much it. And in the coding, the heading code has had a massive change. I'm not going to try and explain it because I could barely explain it to myself. But it was an issue where the plane would do a full 360 turn instead of turning the 5 degrees to the left when you cross the heading of 0 back to 360. I'm not sure if you'll be able to understand that, but it was a lot of coding. And yeah, that's it. So, let's load the level and I'll show you how to fly this thing. And I ended up having to remove that first officer's checklist, because it made something called performance cost go above 5,000, which I didn't want for a reason, so I had to remove it. So when you first load the level, you'll probably start the runway. I'd recommend, for realism, going to, say, a park location, like this. And then for ultimate realism, I'd recommend you do something like turn on the plane just quickly, start the APU, turn on all the hydraulics, and that way the gear doors can open, and we can also go ahead and open the cargo door. And then just shut it all off, turn everything back off, And there we go. The plane is turned off and everything is set up the way we want it. We can also go ahead and hide the graphical user interface because we don't need that because the plane has all the information we need. So I'm not sure what part of the video you've seen already, but I was flying to Avalanche Airport, this airport, and I accidentally flew a little too close to the airspace, and it got blown up. So I'm just going to do the flight back, because the flight back from Avalanche is actually pretty safe because it flies past the airspace, which is hidden by mountains as we fly out. So there's no chance of me getting blown up, or if I do, I don't lose that much progress. Anyway, so you've already seen how to start the plane up just to get the initial landing gear doors open and cargo bay door open. So, anyway, so this is the checklist. This is where all the information on how to fly the plane is. And to pick it up, or do that, just click it, it's a giant button, and use these smaller buttons to change pages. So first thing we're going to do is turn on all the electrics, and it's pretty much battery, electrics master switch, and then all of these, which are all lights, and the avionics. And the avionics is just all the computer stuff and all these displays. But for the autopilot, conveyors, just general things, and all the instruments too. Where it says check on, that means check the switch, like battery check on. Check it. If it's off, then turn it on. Or if it's on, then just do nothing. Just make sure it's on. And then on if running means that if the engine is running, then have the alternator on. If not, just leave it off. Then we have hydraulics and APU. So we're going to turn on all the fuel tank pumps, the fuel master switch, then the APU fuel switch, and then we're going to turn on the APU, so APU master switch, starter, which starts the APU, then we're going to turn on the alternator because the APU is running now. Then we have all the hydraulics, so just all of these, the master, then the APU input. And then we have the engine starts page, so APU check running, yep it's running. So then we activate a parking brake, so click this button, because in real life you just pull this up, but in SimplePlanes you can't do that, so I added a button. Engine fuel switches, which are all these 4 buttons, check off, they're off. And then we have all 4 engines, it's the same thing 4 times. Engine fuel switch, button, master switch, starter until it's on, alternator, and then hydraulics. Then repeat that 3 more times. And there we go. And then we have pre-taxi. So just follow all these prompts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check cargo door is closed. And there are controls here. Or if you want to be realistic, there's a switch here. But I'm pretty sure that switch is somewhat hard to reach. And one thing I completely forgot about is there's a cockpit door here. And to open and close it, just click this button or pull that lever. And then flaps, check setting 1. So either move this lever, but you can't do that unless you have virtual reality, or press your Z and X keys to move the VTOL input, or, and I just remember this, I fly this plane without the user interface shown because all the information is on the plane, so I recommend hiding that. And one thing to note is this slider, you can still move the slider where it is, even though it's hidden, so just make sure it's on setting 1, which it is now. And then let me turn off the APU because everything else is running. So alternator off, APU fuel switch off, the master. Then I leave the hydraulic switch on for the APU input because it doesn't do anything. And then this is all just tuning information in. And the order I'm going to do it now is not what it tells you to do, but it doesn't really matter that much. So COM 1 and 2, those are what frequencies to talk to air traffic control. But there's no air traffic control in SimplePlanes, so it's just there, even though you never use it. So you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it. The destination airport is Wright Airport. So we're going to tune the ATC to 110.5. And there are 2 sets of pluses and minuses. So the bottom one is modified by 5. And the top one is modified by 0.5. And that applies to all 8 of these. And then the ATIS, that stands for Airport Terminal Information Services. That's just information about like the runway, the conditions, the weather, what runways in use, things like that. And once again, it doesn't do anything because we're in SimplePlanes, not a flight simulator. And that is ON90. ILS, that's called Instrument Landing System, and that is another advanced system. And if you've been watching my other YouTube videos, then you'll know that it took me forever to code, and it was a big nightmare to code, but it sort of works. That's this module here, with the needles and some controls. And the localizer frequency is also included in here. I'm going to right, which has 2 runways, so nav 1 I tend to put on the primary frequency they're going to be using. Then if the airport has 2 or more runways, then I have nav 2 on the other runway that we are not going to be using, but we could use if we had to. So we're going to be flying in south, so runway 18, which is south, so 110, and then 109.5. And then we're going to select nav 1 as the input, and then this is runway 18, so we're going to change that to be 18. Then there's the autopilot, and just like the COM1 and nav modules, there's 2 pluses and 2 minuses. And this one is by 5 or by 1. And this one is just by like hundreds, and this is also in hundreds. This one I put to 1,000, and the best input for that. That's vertical speed, that's how fast the plane should climb or descend. And then we have the altitude, which I'm going to set to be... Initially we want it to be 2,000 so I don't fly too high and get seen by the ice base. That's how I got blown up when I was trying to fly into Snowstone, which is this airport. No, this airport is Avalanche, Snowstone is the island. And the heading, initially it's going to be 270 because that is west, that's that direction. You'll notice there's a heading bug here. Well, there's a dot here that keeps moving around. That is called a heading bug. And that is just a visual indicator of where the target heading is on your compass. And then this is after takeoff, so now we're ready to taxi. Just disengage the parking brake. And then just taxi to the runway that you're going to be taking off from. And there we go, ready for takeoff, so we can go ahead and increase power, not to 100%, but something like 80 because the power isn't really that much of a difference. Or we want to have the thrust dials go to 3, whatever unit that is. I have no idea what unit that is in, but we want to go to the number 3. Rotate speed is 160, and I recommend you have a joystick to fly this plane, or you can just use mouse as joystick. Then once a positive rate of climb is established, we can go ahead and track the landing gear. And then we can go ahead and also engage the autopilot, which we're going to tune to actually be a heading of 300. I'm actually going to set this to be 1,500 altitude. And we want to just, basically on climb out, just fly around all these obstacles. Then we can go ahead and retract the flaps. And then we can open a checklist which says to do those things. And then that is it. And then the next one is on approach, which is going to be done at right. So what we're going to be doing on climb out is just change the heading on the autopilot as required. And then eventually want that set that to 180 to go south. And then once we're past the ice base a bit, we can climb to something like 8,000 feet. So I'll go ahead and do that, and I'll see you when it's time to land at Wright Airport. So we're coming in pretty close to Wright Airport now, so we can go ahead and start our descent. This time we're going to descend at 500 feet per minute. That's what this variable speed is, in feet per minute. I'll set the altitude to something like, maybe, I think 1,000 should do it for now. And I'm changing the heading so I can do a straight in approach to the airport. I think I'll descend 1,500 actually. And you can sort of see the runway there. And eventually, what you'll see is the ILS needles will come alive. And I'm not going to go into detail on how you use them here, but if you know what this is, then you know how to use it. If not, then you don't really need to use it, but it's there. And we're getting close to the point where I just disable the autopilot. Here's the ILS needle. So I need to go a bit to the right. Checklist just says that stuff's basically flaps, start putting them down when you're getting somewhat close. Decrease throttle a bit. And you'll notice these four ones here, they're auto mixture. The mixture controls that I wrote some auto mixture code for. And they change the input based on how high the plane is in altitude. Anyway, so coming in, I'm not going to talk now, I'm just going to fly. And then just as we come in, we pull up to flare the nose, watch your vertical speed and altitude. And there we go, we touched down. I think this plane brakes too fast, or this is a very long runway. But we only needed the first turn-off point. And then one of the items in the checklist is to start the APU. So I'll go ahead and do that. Then we're going to start our after landing checklist, so APU start. Autopilot switches, check them off. And then reset. That just resets the value to what it was before, which is 50 or 500. Then flaps, check up, so we're going to put the flaps up. Nav 1 and 2, reset them. And I like to reset this to 0 even though there's no reset switch. And if you're wondering what this approach mode is, that was meant to be where you could select this and the plane would literally land itself. But it turned out to be very buggy, and even though I say to use it in the checklist, don't do that. Because it's very buggy, and it'll probably crash the plane. The landing lights off. Then we have a parking checklist. So it's pretty much taxi to where you want to go, and then stop, parking brake, and then checklist, which is just engines off, that sort of stuff. I'm just going to taxi to around here, then parking brake, checklist, engine alternators off, that way there's no warnings when the engines go off, engine fuel switches off, that stops the engines, master, then trim, reset, I never even used it, then COM 1 and 2, then we reset that, then all the lights go off, here's the cargo door, so we open that, then all this goes off, and basically all the lights. I leave avionics on though. Then all the hydraulic switches, I turn them off because we don't need them. Then shutdown, so engine alternator off, APU fuel switch off, master, then all the fuel goes off, and then avionics, battery, well, avionics, master, then battery, and then that is it. So I hope you learned something from this, hopefully you know how to fly this plane now. And that's it for this video, hope you enjoyed. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!